I now call this meeting to order. Item 1. Item 2, any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing
No.
none, moving on. Previous minutes. Now, interesting enough, other groups I've been in, they call for a motion and a second, have any discussions, and then vote. Is that the way we should do it here, or should we continue? Yeah, okay. We have the previous minutes. Do I have at least a motion and second for provisionally adopting the minutes? Let's see, Lee, Jody, Lee motion, Jody second. Any discussion about the minutes? Any comments, clarifications, omissions?
No.
You're good?
Yeah.
All in favor accepting the minutes? Okay, thank you, carried. Item 4, Transportation Master Plan Priority Discussion. And that is Sarah. Can you lead us through this, Sarah?
Yeah, I will do my best virtually leading us through it. So, hi, everybody. I know most of you, but a couple of you will probably be new to me. I'm Sarah Merkel. I'm with here in Perth Public Health, and I have just been kind of pulled back into some chronic disease, injury prevention, substance use work, whatever that might look like in the future, because public health, we're still figuring some things out. But I am still kind of maintaining some built environment. And I've had lots of experience with this committee, first sitting on it as a citizen rep, and then sitting on it as part of the health unit, wearing an active transportation, physical activity, built environment hat. And previous to that, I've also sat as a founding board member for the Guelph to Goderich Rail Trail, just so that you kind of get a little bit of a background about me. And I'm a health promoter. So with that being said, Pat, hi, and Felicity, hi, because we haven't, Felicity, we've met years ago, but nice to see you again. So I just wanted to say hello. And kind of the purpose of tonight, I think it's a preliminary conversation is what I'm understanding, and that the consultants for the Transportation Master Plan will be coming to our group and a few other groups to sort of get some input. So from what I gathered, it's an opportunity for us to start putting our heads together to start thinking about some priorities. I don't think this is the last conversation that we'll have about it. And there might be things that you think of after the meeting, and that's fine. We can definitely add those priorities to our list, but it's definitely a place we want to get started and then see how it grows from there. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. The way that I like to facilitate, it's sort of guiding the group. So it's about what the group thinks is best. I've got a couple of options. I'm happy to just kind of let us chat about what our priorities might be. And then I can kind of capture some themes right now. I know that Vicky's going to be taking sort of our detailed minutes, but then also it might be an idea to prioritize some themes. The other thought process I had was I've kind of created my own list of possible priorities to get the ball rolling. Sometimes it's nice not to have that list at first just to see what people come up with, but maybe it's nice to have that list and then people can use it as a jumping off point. So I thought I would put it back to the group to say, what would be your preference for tonight?
Jody?
Thanks. Not to put you on the spot, Nick, but I'm just wondering, because Nick is probably working with the folks that are doing the master transportation plan, the consultants. Do you have anything to add about their process or what, like maybe an overview of what is a master transportation plan? Like just to give everybody a general idea of what all is going to be included in this one.
Okay. So I'm not directly working with the consultant. It's another colleague of mine who's doing that portion. But a master plan is generally a guiding document for municipalities or other figures to guide them what they want to do in the future and set out principles for future projects, future initiatives. And it sort of looks at where we are now and where we want to go And this master plan is related to transportation for the city of Stratford, and not just active transportation, but also vehicles and
Public transportation.
transportation services.
Uh,
So
one
our
yeah.
this committee is a key stakeholder, and a part of the consultation process is the key stakeholders will get some extra time or extra attention when looking for guidance to steer the master plan.
I have one quick question that somebody could answer. Is this a update, a rewrite, or a first-time document?
So I would say it is currently there is transportation master plan that was done, and this was for more vehicles, vehicle oriented. And then there was an active transportation, the bike and pedestrian master plan that was done.
Mhm.
And there was also a plan for the transit. So the
Okay.
intent of this update or this master plan is to encompass all of these into one, so that it's everybody's talking the same language, and projects that can mesh better together, or avoids conflicts with, okay, this plan wants to do this, and now this plan wants to do this, but it's more of a cohesive look at a holistic approach to these master plans.
Okay, Pat, then Sarah.
Sorry, I'm just going to follow up on that, because we did have a separate discussion at Cycle Stratford. So one of the things that we wanted to understand is, because there was already existing plans in place, so is there going to be some reconciliation back to those plans and all those ideas, and what actually was delivered, what wasn't delivered? Because it would seem to make sense to us that there was probably a certain number of things in that plan that ultimately didn't get delivered that should be put back on the table here, or there should be some kind of updating of that information to help this guide this process.
So that's a great point, and I would say that would be a first step for the consultants. Like, not everything needs to be completely scrapped and started again. It's working off old things and making sure that the plan that was in place 10 plus years ago or however long is still valid, and new developments in the city or expropriation in certain areas that we're pivoting on changes that have happened since the initial plan, and then making sure that expensive infrastructure dollars or whatever is going to the right place, and we're making good decisions on good information.
Sarah,
Okay.
you.
Yeah, and I think the key thing is that I imagine they're going to be evaluating sort of where things have where things have come to, and then using that as a jumping off point to start those conversations moving forward. And as Nick said, we might have some different priorities based on several factors that have happened in so many 10 plus years. And so it'll kind of be taking a look at that and then using that as a point to work ourselves forward. And that's the other thing, is that because we have a voice in the process, that's something that we can make sure that the consultants know that that's an important piece. And that's where bringing things like our active transportation report card, for example, is a good thing to give them, so that they can see there's already been some work done in X, Y, and Z stuff. And then also looking at what projects haven't been done, but what projects have been done. Because that's the other thing when we look at that bike and pedestrian plan, is that we can see there's certainly projects that were a 10-year plus project that actually have happened in 3 years because of the roadways. And then the other thing to say is that when we have all these plans together, it allows whoever's doing like an RFP, for example, let's say city has a project that's going to be happening, they're going to have a checklist of things that needs to be taken in consideration for each of those things. So what's your active transportation plan, including pedestrians and cyclists? What's your plan for multi-use trails? What's your plan for tree coverage? What's your plan for bus shelters that's on a sidewalk? So like the goal is bringing everything together so that there's not three different groups sort of talking different languages. It's talking one language at the same time and having those check marks in place to ensure that everything's comprehensively coming together, if that makes sense. And Nick, is that something like that I'm kind of conveying correctly?
Yeah, I think that's a good overview of it, the process.
Certainly the way it should work. Pat.
Sorry. So I would just then suggest as an ask that, because this isn't like our understanding, so I could be wrong, but what I communicated back to the cycle group was that what I heard in the last presentation, Nick, was that there would be an initial meeting with the consulting group in, for sake of argument, early April, and then one again in December. So what I would suggest is, because this is a bit of a evolutionary process, I think we would want more than just those two chances to talk to the consulting group, because it sounds to me that this is going to pull from different places. And like, honestly, we don't have a clear picture on everything that was delivered or wasn't delivered. And then there'll be a lot of new ideas and things change. But I think that would be an ask too, that like there should be another kind of checkpoint meeting in there with the consultants to kind of see, how things are evolving and what additional information can you share with us as part of maybe changing the priorities once we understand the process a little further, or there's more concrete information.
So that is a potential option to increase the frequency of consultation with certain groups. So our last meeting, I did a presentation just sort of talking about
Right.
the process that, the city retained a third party to do some consultation. So within that proposal that they provided, or that we requested, that document, it sets out a certain number of meetings that need to take place. So I can't just say, okay, let's have X amount of meetings, because we requested a price and a consultation agreement between another party for a certain amount of work, and they set aside resources based on what they submitted. So it's an option, but it's not something I can just say yes, yeah, okay, we're gonna have 5 or whatever.
Yeah, no, that's a fair comment, and I'm not trying to make more meetings than are necessary. I'm just trying to make sure that we get a clear understanding of what happened before, how much of that got delivered, what elements from there that didn't get delivered do we need to move forward with, in addition to all these other priorities. That's where I'm kind of lost.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, Sarah?
Yeah, definitely hear your points, Pat. And what I would say is, what I imagine is going to happen is they're going to do a report back based on April consultations and public consultations. We will receive that information back, because that's why they probably, I'm imagining, just from like a project management standpoint, I'm imagining that's why they give such a time frame, because they're going to take all the data, do all the coding and themes, and be able to do a report back before then we come together in December to be able to move things forward. So what I imagine is that we would be having another strategic session as a group in the fall. Once we receive that information back, then we can kind of say, what's the page that we want to be on? What's our priorities? What's our feedback as a group? And then in December, we can go in with sort of a collaborated approach in terms of how we feel as a group based on what the priorities are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to monopolize. But
No,
that's
gosh,
great.
no. I think
I'm
it's
just,
important to understand the process, right? Because we want to feel heard and we want to feel like the process is meaningful, because we are a really important stakeholder. So I think it is important to understand what that looks like. And these are really great questions. Like, I would suggest, just based on like my own project management stuff, if you have specific questions for the consultants that don't come up sort of in their feedback, like in the first meeting, then write those things down and see if that's something that they can address, whether we send that list of questions to them ahead of time to say, hey, these are just some considerations from our group. Are you able to comment on these? Then they can really be prepared going into that first meeting to say, here's our answers to the questions. And then that will help us with that process. So if anyone has those types of, and if that's something that I tease out tonight or tease out in the meantime, where you come up with that question and you want me to capture that, I'm happy to do so.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, so again, like I said, this is a jumping off point. If you haven't had a chance to review the bike and pedestrian master plan from 2014 and the transportation plan from 2010, I would highly recommend you take some time in the next couple of weeks to peruse those. I'm not saying you should spend your days reading 160 pages, but I think they do a really good job of sort of laying out the information in sections that are of interest to our group that you can kind of get into a little bit further. So if you haven't done that, I would definitely recommend. And so kind of going back to the facilitated piece, do you feel like it would be helpful just to jump off and start throwing some ideas out? Or do you want me to share my screen and kind of just put up my list of things that I kind of considered, and you guys can kind of jump in to have conversations of anything that speaks to you?
I like, why don't we start with your list?
And kind of
I'm
see what
okay with
happens from
that.
there? Okay. And by all means, it's just the jumping off point. So feel free to expand and we can add some little notes in or some things, but I just thought sometimes it's easier to start from somewhere to then be picking our brains. So I think I have access. Oh, okay. I will need access to share my screen because it's not showing that right now. There we go. Thank you. And then I'll pull up. I'm going to make this bigger. Okay, so here's just some, maybe it'll be helpful for me to just go through kind of what I've written down, and then we can go from there. David, I will depend on you to help me with flagging people to have opinions, because I can only see so many. So I'll go back and forth, but if you and I can both facilitate in the sense of just calling people to chat, that would be very helpful for me.
Okay.
Okay, so here's some of the topics that I thought as a group that might come up on a plan. So I kind of did some of them into categories. So cycling infrastructure could be things like multi-use trails, on-road bike lanes, bike parking facilities, and then a cycling network. So, and what I mean by bike parking facilities is the different parking units that we would have. And it can be anything from the post and ring to the bigger ones, which I'm forgetting what they're called, but, and then the valet parking. Thank you. And so keeping in mind that, and bike parking facilities also keep in mind sort of location. So we've done a really great job of identifying around the downtown core, but I'm not so sure, and I could be very wrong, of looking at other facilities in the city to ensure that it has adequate bike parking. And then the other thing would be a cycling network. So we do have the bike and pedestrian master plan, but thinking about what would an ideal cycling network, if we wanted to maybe think about starting from scratch slightly, what would be that kind of ideal? Because that might have changed since 2014. It might not have, and that's okay. The next sort of chunk of things would be pedestrian infrastructure, and that would include anything from curb cuts and accessibility to neighborhood connectivity, and then connectivity to public transportation. And then the other thing I kind of had the thought was also like trails. So that would be another pedestrian infrastructure, keeping in mind that. Implementation and plan prioritization. So what does that process look like? How are things prioritized? What is the implementation plan? So that might be something that might be a priority that we flag. Some of the people in this group are familiar with Vision Zero principles, and some people might not be. I'm going to make a note to myself to I'll send it to Vicky, the Vision Zero principles, because that will be a helpful sort of tool. Vision Zero is essentially, and Jody can also speak to this because she's very well versed, is zero fatalities. We want to design our roadways, we want to design our infrastructure that would lead to 0 fatalities on the road, whether it's a pedestrian, a cyclist, or someone in a car. So it's sort of keeping, that's the goal. That's what we're aiming for. And what are our design principles that we would use for Vision Zero principles? So Vision Zero really gets into that, and road safety kind of gets into that. That can be anything from pedestrian crossovers to speed, to roundabouts, to large trucks going through a downtown or alternative truck routes. So those are some concepts in a Vision Zero. And then thinking about principles for new subdivision planning, and then it could include urban planning design principles and complete streets. So that might be something that we flag as a priority, especially as we see that the city is expanding, and just ensuring that all of our plans come together and that we're looking at like that built environment piece. And I'd like to add, like, you know, not food deserts happening, as putting on my public health hat. The other thing would be wayfinding. So I know we had an awesome report that the clerks were in charge of bringing together in terms of wayfinding. So what does that look like in part of this process? Is that a high priority that when something is getting done, that also that wayfinding signage has to be included in that RFP process? So that would be another one. I had added the evaluation of the plan, like the report card. So that's something I think should always be built into something from the start. So when they create this plan, how is it going to be evaluated that it's working, that we're covering off our principles? What's our progress? So that, you know, if we look at this in 10, 15 years, that we can kind of have like point A to point B. So it'd be showing Pat like that clear process and that tracking system of that. And then another thing that could be a priority is staff salary for implementation. So, you know, I know working from public health, there's certain things where we can do off the side of our desk, but it's not something we can designate like a half-time full, like a FTE towards. But maybe that's something that we deem as a priority, that, you know, half of the staff's salary is, or like job is towards the transportation master plan and how that gets executed. So anyways, that is my list. I am open to all and every feedback. And if you just all want to have a discussion about, is there any, what's missing? What are things you like about the miss or the list? And we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, ship it. Looks good.
Can you scroll back up to the top, please? Thank you. So is it okay? Since the top is cycling, I'm sorry, since I'm here on behalf of Cycling Stratford. So I think the gist of this is very good. I don't think it's specific enough. So for example, some of the things we talked about are like, we really don't have a connected bike route around the whole city. Yeah, so the way it's been built so far, it's in pieces. And so one of the things that we talked about, I mean, if we're going to go ideal here, at least as a starting point, that we would like to see a connected bike route, ideally, first off, that is a complete outer circle of the city of Stratford. But we also think that that there are existing cycle routes within the city that have been, and multi-use trails that have been built within the city, that we can actually, can we start to connect some of those together. And apparently, I was talking to Wayne, and he said apparently there was a proposal a few years back about how to connect some of the existing bike lanes that we do have to make some kind of an integral route. And he said that that proposal still exists, so I can get a hold of that. But I think you get the gist of what we're talking about here.
Yep, this is perfect. This is exactly kind of the like bread and butter that we're looking for. So it's sort of, these are the themes, and then here's the specifics that we want to get out of it.
Yeah. And I mean, and again, if we're going, I mean, this is just brainstorming, right? So.
Yes, absolutely. We're not committed to
Okay.
anything. This is just a preliminary conversation, just to
Right.
start getting our heads into it, right? So we can come back and be able to reevaluate this, but it's nice just to sink under, like get into something and then go from there.
Right. So, and I think like a lot, like the connected bike route also, we'd like to see if we can have some kind of like connections like within the city too. So maybe ideally where we'd have, you know, connected routes that can clearly take people to the four corners of within the city, right? So if somebody was working out like in the factory section or whatever. So we'd like something that was, I like it, like it's great to add it every time we're doing you know, a new build, but you know, we have pieces that don't go anywhere. So that was, I think, the other thing we talked about was we'd like to have some, and maybe this is kind of tied to the bike parking facilities, but some kind of increased focus on safety measures. Okay, so like, you know, we have bike theft, and then maybe certain people are hesitant to ride their bikes downtown because there's, you know, transportation risks and different things. So, you know, or to go get groceries and maybe, you know, they're worried about their bikes getting stolen. So just, we'd like see if there's ways that we can increase safety measures, both in terms of, you know, complying with the transportation laws, but also, you know, helping to minimize bike thefts.
Okay. Jody, you had a point earlier, and then Felicity.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah, thanks. I was just going to follow up on sort of the cycling network. I was a former board member of Cycle Stratford, so I actually think I have that original plan that we sat down and sort of hashed out a kind of a spoke, like a wheel with spokes coming in. That plan does exist. So, I mean, it would be great if we forwarded that to the consultants just so they could have a look at it. I even know that we did get costing for some of it, although it would be kind of old now. So that I think that connectivity is really important for cycling, especially, right? Because we do need to have routes, and then that would tie in also with wayfinding, because some of the routes may include like residential streets that don't necessarily need infrastructure, but we would need to indicate to people, how do you get from this infrastructure to the next by using this residential street? So, you know, or even having it painted on the road, like or, you know, whatever ways that we want to do indication that that it's sort of a connected route that people could use. And I think that also makes cyclists anyway feel more safe, but also it reminds motorists that they need to share the road. So I think that the cycling network is a really important principle, because like you said, that the old master plan was sort of, well, let's just add in stuff when we redo the roads. The problem is that was in the bike and pedestrian master plan, but it wasn't in the transportation master plan. So when RFPs were going out, all of a sudden it was like, oh, well, we forgot about that other piece of infrastructure that should have been added for cyclists or for pedestrians. So this is the really key for having it all in one plan. But having that mindset of, you know, we're doing specific work in some places to make sure that we get that network happening sooner than later. So I see it as a priority.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm glad you raised the points you raised there.
Felicity, you had further comments?
I wanted to talk just a little bit about bike parking. I wondered if we could start maybe with one bigger one downtown and one at the mall, maybe, just for argument's sake. I know there are rings and places to park your bike and everything, but they're not at all safe. So I was thinking about having one that's clear that there are cameras on it. You know how people have signs saying that this is monitored somewhere close to the police station or something like that, where people would feel like, okay, if I'm going to be gone for a couple of hours, say I wanted to ride my bike to the theater, most people in Stratford wouldn't do that because they know when they come out, they may not have a bike anymore.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of thing that then you drive or walk or,
Yeah.
you know, but biking isn't an option, same as you would not ride your bike out to the mall, go into the mall and do something and come out and feel like it was going to be okay. But I don't see why it couldn't be if there were cameras on it and signage, or it was where somebody already was sitting so that people felt like it would be safe. Not just a bike rack to put your own little lock on.
Sarah?
Yeah, I was going to say that, and people of ATAC with some history, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was some prioritization of those corrals across the city, across the downtown. And I know one got installed at the library, one was installed at York Street, and we did look at options across, I think at the liquor store and at one of the banks downtown. Jody, is this ringing a bell?
Yeah, so we have installed bike corrals. I haven't seen a huge uptake in that. It's just basically, it's not necessarily secure bike parking, but it's an improvement. It is a little bit bigger. It's just that they're a little awkward to use, I find. But the other thing I was going to mention was we were looking at we've been talking about redoing the Erie Street parking lot, and there's been designs made, and we specifically, ATAC made a request that we would have some permanent bike parking type of structure back in that Erie parking lot, and that it would somehow be covered and secure. So that would have been like, well, it hopefully in the future, that's going to be happening. And, you know, as the parking lot is being redone, that's a great opportunity to put, you know, a nice piece of infrastructure in, and not just sort of, you know, oh, let's put this beside, you know, this because we have some space. So that I don't know if parking lots are part, and parking itself, I don't know if that's part of the master transportation plan. Maybe Nathan can comment on that, because I almost think it's separate, but I'm not sure.
The other place would be, I'm thinking about places I've gone and worried about my bike. And the other place would be the Rotary. Like there's a lot of traffic to the Rotary. A lot of people could ride their bikes there, but they're going to be in there for a while is the point. It's when you're going to be leaving your bike for a couple of hours to go and do a program or something, right? So I would just like to see that. I mean, look at all the energy that goes into parking lots.
Yeah.
Compared to all we want is a safe place for your bike. It's not very big. It doesn't take up, you know, it doesn't have to take up too much room.
But
I have a question for the group. Like, where does our thinking go with kind of going more into multi-use trails? So just thinking back what they did up by TJ Dolan, like there's kind of e-bikes now, there's people with scooters, you know, like there's people in like the battery operated wheelchairs and stuff. Like, I'm just curious about, I'm new to this, but I'm just curious what our thoughts are around multi-use trails and what can be incorporated within that kind of a multi-use trail, as opposed to, like, I mean, I'm great. I'm a big proponent of biking, but I'm just saying, like, I'm just thinking beyond that to say, okay, well, can some of these, like, if it might be important to make them more multi-use trails.
Sarah?
I will add some 2 cents from a person with young children. So I have 3 kids, 5 and under, and we go out for family bike rides. I do like having, I live in the west end of the city near the high schools. I do love having access to multi-use trails. It's a great opportunity for me as a parent of young kids to allow them to make mistakes while riding their bike and not feeling like, oh my God, Riker, get in the bike lane, like swerve this way. So like that's and I'm also newer to cycling. So I also feel like multi-use trails are a great opportunity to get people like myself comfortable with cycling because it is off-road and because there is, we have the courtesy of kind of navigating those multi-use trails as both pedestrians and cyclists and wheeler,
Right.
like anyone wheeling. So I would say that I love the prioritization of multi-use trails. Now, does that look like around the city? Yeah, maybe. That would be a great kind of thought of what that outside the city. And I know we're already getting there because there's ones that are being added or like working on, but that would be sort of my thought processes. I would say it's a great priority. That I still do enjoy doing having bike lanes available versus not. But also as a parent with young children, it is sometimes, heart palpitating to know that there are people I find pretty much are very respectful, but it's more my kid that I'm worried about that's like gets distracted and does the like little veer out of the bike lane and goes back in, and the car is still giving us room, but maybe not enough because my child is, so I think it's those kind of things to kind of consider in our priorities.
Lee.
Yeah, just to kind of build on that, I think that's a great point. And just looking over this list, maybe just another kind of perspective to take that I know everyone's got in the back of their mind, but something that I always think of is surveys about things that prevent people from biking or walking more, and the things that make them fearful or hesitant. And so I think something that we can carry with us throughout this activity is trying to address what some of those main concerns are to further provide that uptake so we have more people biking and walking in the city, right? And trying to prioritize what those issues would be that make people hesitant and addressing them as a priority so that we can encourage that uptake. And certainly I think multi-use trails are one of the bee's knees for that. You're absolutely right. It's isolated, it's off the road, right? It's the bikes that are the crazy ones on the multi-use trails, right? And so I agree. I think that's a great way to go about it. Absolutely. And yeah, certainly ideal. So just something to keep in mind. Yeah.
Yes, Sarah.
Those are awesome points. And whenever I like to do a prioritization kind of process, there's always nice to have those types of criteria that we keep sort of at our forefront. And I would say that addressing barriers through the priorities that come out of this plan would be a great criteria to have as we move forward and prioritize. So I think you hit an awesome point, Lee, in the sense of bringing that up. And maybe that's one of our criteria of how we prioritize in the future and how we bring that forward.
Jody.
Just a note, on the previous bike and pedestrian master plan, there's quite a bit of information on that. And I mean, I know it's from 2014, but I think some of those barriers still exist. We haven't really gone that far on that plan. So
No, I don't.
I think, that data has been collected, and I think it should really guide what we're doing. I think you're absolutely right, because that's what we want to do. We want to encourage people to feel, I mean, people say, well, there's a lot of residential streets you can ride on. Well, people don't feel safe. So
Yeah.
how can, even though maybe they will be, we need to create that confidence in people as well to be able to use the road. And that will get us to the discussion about speed, which might be coming up later, but anyway.
Oh, car speed limits? Yep.
Okay.
David, can I ask you, since I'm facilitating, do you have any feedback that you'd like to share?
Well, I'm just looking at some of that. I mean, time after time, 60% of the population said they'd love to bike, but they're afraid.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the more safe facilities we can have.
Yeah, definitely. And it also goes back to our bike friendly application where it's the infrastructure is definitely really important, but it's also giving people those tools to be able to get on a bike. So, how do you fix your bike? How do you ride a bike? Like, it's all those education encouragement opportunities that can really help people get to feeling that comfort level of taking the step of buying a bike or getting a helmet or going out for a ride. And so I think that's maybe not part of this process here, but certainly a part of our jobs within ATAC is to continue pushing that forward. Maybe that is part of this plan. I don't know, but I would definitely say that would be part of it.
Well, sorry. I
Okay, yeah,
forget-
Pat?
put up my hand. Well, so maybe under safety measures, it's also education,
Great.
right? So
Awesome.
like, so that would be, in my mind, a way to add it. We did have an idea out of Cycle Stratford, since we were talking about speed limits, whether in some areas we could reduce the car speed limits to make cycling safer. So maybe under safety, that's something we could at least throw in there for
That's-
consideration.
That's under the Vision Zero speed.
Oh, okay.
Yep, great. Got it.
Yep, Jody?
I can speak to that a little bit. Kathy and I have brought forward lowering speed limits on all residential roads to 40. We've done it twice. It was defeated the first time, but we had only recommended it would be in a certain area, a small area. So now we've asked staff to look at making all residential or local roads 40, just as a start. And you know, within Vision Zero, that's a big part of it. Is, you know, when a pedestrian or a cyclist is hit at different speeds, what is their ability to actually live through that? And at 50, it's really low. 40, it's your chances to survive are much better, and it goes from there. So, you know, in Toronto and a lot of other places, Kitchener, Waterloo, London, like there's a lot of reduction speed limits going on. So it's a movement in the province. It would be great if provincially they would just make it everybody, like, because provincially right now it is 50 and municipalities can lower it. Really, it would be great if the province just said, everybody do this. Would be much easier, but anyway.
I lived in Mississauga for 25 years, and I was very surprised when I went back to visit that just about everywhere is 40 and 30 in school zones, or the junior schools. So, okay, we've spent a little time on cycling. Oh, I was going to suggest we move on to the more of the pedestrian side of things.
Good.
Jody.
Yeah, so I do quite a bit of walking as well. And one thing that's always driven me crazy, again, is connectivity. So we do have a lot of, well, it seems like a lot when you're walking around, sidewalks that just stop. Like they end and then you have to cross the street.
Yeah.
Or yeah, like I was biking the other day on McCarthy, right near the McCarthy place, the retirement residence. And I was in the bike lane, and I just happened to look over and I see the sidewalk actually just stops and it plunges down about 4 feet. And I was like, wow, that, like, it's like at the plank almost. Anyway, so there are definitely spots that that need some sort of connectivity so that we're not forcing people to continually cross streets, if that's possible. And if they have to cross the street, that there would be some sort of pedestrian crossings.
Yeah, there's a couple in my neighborhood where it's mid-block, it goes along and then it just stops. So you're not even at a place where people expect you to be crossing. So, Sarah?
Yeah, I definitely echo these points here. And the other thing could be is how does that, because I understand it costs a lot of money to do connection of sidewalks. So it's also, is there a priority for certain areas in town to go first? So for example, is it near school? That should be prioritized. We would recommend that the priority, the dollars go into making sure our schools are well connected first, and then going into maybe some lower socioeconomic neighborhoods, and then going from there. So I think that that might be part of our recommendation or process is what is the criteria for this neighborhood connection? And, is that something that's important moving forward?
One other thing that I would put in the pedestrian infrastructure side, I haven't looked at it directly, but it is an issue that has come up elsewhere, is access to the transit. Where you may have a concentration of multi-use or multi-unit buildings, and there's no way to get from there to a convenient bus stop. You're downtown, how easy is it to walk to the actual stops at the transit center? A lot of places where they have road access, that they focus on road access only and miss the pedestrians.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. In my drives, because I'm always looking at built environment, is I noticed a bus shelter and it not having any sidewalks leading to it. And I'm like, how is somebody supposed to access this if they have accessibility issues? Like, I can only imagine that parent that's coming from Devon Street and that area of town, who's coming up, having a hard time like wheeling their stroller, getting it over curbs, getting on the bus there. I can only imagine what that's going to look like. And then I imagine what somebody with a wheelchair, is the bus going to pull forward and allow them in the parking lot driveway? So that's just one small example, but I think that's a great point, David, is the prioritization possibly of our connection to and access to public transportation. And then also that maybe in the neighborhood connectivity school zones to start off with, those might be like higher priority lists. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And then you're also hitting your vulnerable road users, which would be children, and also people from not lower socioeconomic status, but people who do rely on public transportation, that some may be from lower socioeconomic status.
Just one, I'll let you get the note down, but the curb cuts also crosses over into the multi-use trail and cycling. When we were planning routes in Mississauga, we had huge numbers of multi-use trails to connect neighborhoods, but you came out onto the street and you're onto a sidewalk, and there's no way to get down then onto the road where you were supposed to be. At least Stratford has allowances for using the sidewalk in the heavy areas. But Mississauga theoretically had a ban on cycles on sidewalks. So.
Just to touch on sidewalk priorities, the city does have a policy on sort of trying to finish these connecting links or where there's sections missing, and it sets up a priority. Arterial roads is first, and then collector, and then residential having one. I would think that would be a good way of voicing your opinion, would be amending that existing policy or commenting on it so that it guides the city in the right direction by if there's other priorities that need to be taken into account rather than just the classification of the roads, such as like schools that you mentioned, that there's some clear way of putting that in the policy so that it drives things the way that you see fit.
I think it predates your attendance in our sessions here, but we've done at least 2 prioritization sessions that we worked with the accessibility advisory group as well and put together. And so in your report last month, we saw a couple of our strong recommendations showing up on the list. So the process is working, which is nice. Sarah?
Yeah, could I also add, Nick, if there's any policies that from the city's perspective that you can flag the exact policy for us that we can add in to this document, I think that would be really helpful, because then we're giving sort of that recommendation to the consultant to say, hey, I know they're going to do this, but it makes their lives even easier. Hey, this is the existing policy. We'd be happy to provide some input. These are some things that need to be considered. So not that you have to do it right now, but if you can send it to me at some point. And this would be like, I imagine this is a live document. This is not something that's set in stone after tonight. So we can definitely come back to this and be able to collect our thoughts and keep going with this conversation.
And there is, you see it throughout the city where there's just like, oh, the sidewalk ends. And as just a general population, you're gonna think, what were they thinking? What could they honestly be thinking? But there really is a lot more to it. Like it'll stop because there's a development that's going to happen in this area, and if we put a sidewalk in, it's going to get destroyed by construction. Or if we hold off until this developer is ready to go, they are obligated to pay for this. So it's not, resources aren't being used from the tax dollars. It's part of the development fee. Or there's a piece of land that needs to be purchased because there isn't sufficient right-of-way room, and either the funds aren't there to buy the piece of land, or the person isn't willing to. Or there's just conflicts with elevation changes or utilities or trees that are people are fond of and things like that, or the bridge isn't wide enough. There's definitely more to it than just it just someone decided to make it stop there. But yeah, I definitely see the frustration, and when it does, it's not there's no continuity to it. But yeah.
Sarah?
And maybe that's something, like, I think it's really important to always be transparent with our public. And these are really great points that you're making, Nick, but people wouldn't know that, right? So is it something as simple as a sign that's going up at the end of the sidewalk to say, hey, we know it ends here. However, this is going to be worked on in 3 years from now. It will be getting done. Like we didn't want to have to rip it out again because of X, Y, and Z. I know that's very lengthy sign, but I don't know if that transparency piece is part of it. I don't know. It's just nice for people to know why.
Joni, do you?
Yeah, I agree with Sarah. I was just thinking that the place I described, I was more worried actually that, like, if it was snowing, that somebody would actually be walking along, it might fall off the end, which would be a big problem for us. But I do think I'm familiar with the existing policy, and I think it's good. And I would like us to overlap it maybe with, like, for instance, we're looking at the high school. It's on Foreman. So that's a collector road. So that's priority, but it's also a school. So, that to me, like, what's out, what are the, what kind of zone is it? As well as what type of road. I think to overlap both of those would be kind of important. So maybe it's taking that policy and adding a few more, in priority to it, if that makes sense. And I must say, like, this committee recommended, along with the accessibility committee, the sidewalks around the hospital. And I really think that's great that that's happening, because again, there's a zone that we're like, it's really important. People getting tests at the hospital, taking public transportation. There were no sidewalks to connect a bus stop with the entrance to the hospital, or, or somebody coming from Spruce Lodge wasn't able to go on the right side of the street. So I really, I think that's one of our big successes in this group, working with the city to get that project done. It's really great.
Not to put people on the spot, but I also want to make sure that voices are heard. So I'm going to jump to Felicity. I know that you're a newer member here, but I also appreciate that you bring fresh eyes. Is there anything from your experience or things that you would like to get added on here? Or if it's something you want to send to me afterwards, that's cool too.
No, I think it's a good list. And a lot of these things I've thought about, or else I've seen them written out. And I walk and bike all over town, and all of the issues people have raised. It's not like I don't have several sidewalks in my neighborhood that end, So yes, but I always just think it's just, there's not enough money for everything, right? So it's always about priorities.
For
But
sure.
sometimes you just wish that walking and biking and public transportation were the priority instead of cars. That's the issue for us.
Bernard, I'm going to jump to you. I know you, sometimes it's hard to hear everything, but if there's anything that you wanted to chime in, I'm happy to hear it. Or if that's something you want to do at another time, that's great too.
Well, yeah, thanks. I'm hearing fine tonight. You've got trails listed, and I don't know whether this, the committee has made some decisions about signage of the Avon Trail side trail through Stratford, beginning with new signs in the TJ Dolan, and secondly, blazing the trail through the TJ Dolan, and a third phase would be continuing those blazes to the east end of the city where the trail goes through the city. And I'm not sure if that's something the committee has decided and allotted money for, and presumably it's in the works, and I'm not sure if it belongs in this list or not.
I think it's still a good thing to flag because it keeps it top of mind. So I will definitely add these considerations in because we want to make sure that all of this information is getting put forward to the consultant. So thank you for bringing those up.
Okay, thank you.
I think that fits into the pedestrian infrastructure quite well, because I prefer to find the quieter routes to walk. You know, in the good weather, I hate walking along Devon because the road of the noise on the road is quite significant. I was surprised the Teslas were as noisy as the other cars, except for the ones with the weird except for the cars with the weird mufflers. Jody?
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe highlight something Felicity said, like just maybe we want to give some like overarching things, like we definitely, I think, agree with Vision Zero, but maybe we want to say something right at the top of, you know, we want to see more priority given to cycling and pedestrians and public transit, you know, so that we have a little more weight, you know, in comparison to vehicles. So I don't know how we want to say that, what kind of language we want to use around it, but I think it's important right off the top to say, you know, our number one priority is that we should be more of a priority.
But there's been a description of war on cars. I think it's just a return to balance. It was the, I think it was the New York Auto Club that made jaywalking a crime in North America.
I like that, finding balance with cars. Lee, anything else that you would like to contribute?
Yeah, sure. One thing just kind of came to mind, and stepping off from those points there, not to have a war on cars, but maybe a war on parked cars, where on-street parking, right? I think of Devon here, David, right? We have a kilometer stretch where you can fit on-street parking, but you only ever see 3 or 4 cars using it. And if there's the room for it, I don't know what the engineers would say, where you could have bike lanes on that instead, that would be a great arterial for bikes moving east-west in this end of town, where there'd be minimal impact to the actual loss of parking. I know, but I know that's a very contentious issue. I know that people who lose on-street parking for them, it's a big issue, so it can be difficult to do that. But where there's that room, that's an easier way to expand our cycling infrastructure with minimal loss or cost beyond that.
Now, for example, in Devon, it's got no parking on the north side.
Yeah,
At least.
Right.
Yeah.
One-way streets are a place where that could happen, and that was written into the other plan, I think.
You're right.
But it hasn't really happened.
And when you have curbside parking, it's runs the risk of dooring. So it's, again, that's the whole street where you design with the appropriate principles.
Yeah, the complete street design is
Complete street, thank you.
Yeah, that's really important, I think. Actually, as I was biking down Foreman, I thought, you know, rather than putting bike lanes in, maybe this needs to be a 3-lane road with the center turn lane and slow the speed limit right down and just like narrow the lanes, and then the bikes and cars share. I don't know. I just, a non-engineer having dreams as they're cycling down the street.
Okay. How's everyone feeling sort of with this list, with these? I don't think in the essence of time, it's already 8:05 and I'm sure brains get fried by this part of the day. I don't know if we want to spend some time at our next meeting sort of prioritizing things, or that's an opportunity where I could kind of create this into like a mini survey essentially, and then have people sort of rank some things. I don't know. What's everyone's take on how we move forward with this here? And I would obviously send this document out to everyone to review.
I had made a couple notes just during through the process, a couple things that came to mind. One that I see is like on the project side, it's, you know, up-to-date costing for these projects. So, you know, the bike and pedestrian master plan set out projects and priorities and timelines. I think up-to-date costing for the projects is vital so that a realistic timeline can be set aside, and, you know, either people, if the city's not performing, then they can be held accountable, but also that the city is provided a reasonable amount of time to get some of these projects done. In the last 3 years, we were just doing some review internally. In the last 3 years, like road reconstruction projects have increased by 50% in 3 years. So like you can imagine what that does to, you know, basically it just, you know, reduces, instead of 1 kilometer of work, you're getting 666 meters of it done. That's one thing that came to mind. And then the multi-use trail, there was like a brief discussion just on cycling lanes versus multi-use trail. Both are great. I see the benefit of multi-use trails out. Usually it's replacing, when we do install them, usually it's replacing an existing sidewalk. You know, there's only so much room in the right of way, and a sidewalk, no matter what we do, is going to be there. So if that 1.5 meters of width is used for a sidewalk, and then an additional 1.5 for the difference between the multi-use trail and a sidewalk, it's fairly achievable. And my other comment was the bike.
Nick, can I interrupt quickly?
Yeah,
Is it cost effective too? Like thinking about asphalting versus cement?
It's getting closer and closer to be the same price.
Okay.
Oil prices right now. But,
right. Okay.
And then the bike corral, there was some talk about, you know, what the ideal bike corral looks like and bike parking. I think really telling them what you want or when's the applicable time for this style versus that style is going to be important. Like if we don't hear anything, we're going to just keep installing the same style bike corral because we don't want to have 50 different styles of things. But if you can standardize it and say, okay, this is the ideal thing we have to buy, and we'll just specify that thing and we'll buy that style. That was it for the comments I had, but there was a lot of good thoughts there.
And sorry, Nick, that I didn't come to you. I obviously should have. David, anything else from you?
Well, I think we've got a good basis for looking at the consultant's first phase constructively.
So next steps, does it make sense for me to send it out to people? People have a read through the bike and pedestrian master plan from 2014, the transportation plan, and then is it I don't know if the consultants are coming in early April to chat with us or if it's going to be after our next meeting. I just want to make sure that we're prepared for whenever that consultation is going to be.
Do we have a timeline, anybody?
Last I heard sorry. Says the exact time is still being finalized. We should know more next week, but expecting the meeting in early April.
Okay. Maybe I'll put my brain together with Councillor Burback and Councillor Vasilakis of some possible what next steps might be. And maybe it is me creating like a little mini survey that we do some ranking. But once you get the date, Nick, that would be great if you could send that out, and then we can kind of figure out from there what we want our next steps to be. We can do a couple of things over email.
Okay.
Does that sound fair to everybody? What my next task will be, I'll do this tomorrow, so it's done fairly quickly, is I'll send this out, or I'll send it to Vicky. Then Vicky, you can send it out to the group, and then I'll include links to the documents that could be reviewed with it as well.
Okay.
Thank you, Sarah, for doing all
Yeah, that was great.
that.
Happy to do it. This is definitely, I love facilitating. So I'm glad that you guys had thought of me when I wasn't here.
Having been on a similar committee, it's wonderful to have resource such as yourself.
Oh, well, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really happy to do it. Okay, I will hand things back over to you, David.
Thank you. Okay. Item 5, any new business? Is there anything, Sarah?
Oh, me again. So to give you just a quick background, we were listed as an honorable mention for our bike-friendly communities application. I think it came in last year that we got our honorable mention, yay team. And they've asked us to put together a 1-minute video sort of highlighting some of our key accomplishments with that. So Councillor Burback and myself and Councillor Vasilakis had kind of thrown together some things, and I created a video. So I thought I would show it to you all here. It's due on Friday, but yeah, I can give you a sneak peek. And if there's any feedback that you have, that would be helpful. Does that sound okay to everybody? Okay, so sharing again, pulling up this. And then I think I just need to here send. Okay. I put this together in like a half an hour today, so I hope it's okay. So that was it.
Cool.
Any?
That's very impressive for half an hour work. And I must say, I love how my bike was the only bike parked in all the bike parking, because every day there were no bikes downtown parked in any city infrastructure. Like there were bikes chained to weird stuff, but there were no bikes on a post and ring anywhere. So yeah, that happened.
Okay, great. Then I will send that off to them. And good work, everybody.
Okay. Any other
Thank you.
No problem.
any other business?
Yeah, I just have one minor one. It's on Monday at the upcoming council meeting. There's a report going regarding funding for active transportation. I'm doing 3 applications, well, pending council's approval on Monday. I'm doing 3 applications for 3 active transportation projects. The first one is the Erie Street multi-use trail, replacing what's there, widening and extending. The second one is installation of bike lanes on McCarthy Road from Romeo Street to Mornington, as well as a sidewalk on the north side. And the third one is for a multi-use trail from on Duro Street from Romeo down CH Meyer to Devon. So those are we'll see what happens at council. I'm sure they're gonna say, okay, to do the application, but the time will come when, okay, we did a budget, and, you know, if we get the funding, then it'll be, you know, money's not necessarily set aside for these, even though we are only paying 40%. So it's just something to keep your eye on and see what happens Monday, and then if we're successful, what happens following that.
Looking forward. Sarah,
Could you say again where on Duro Street? Because I was trying to imagine it when I was driving down Duro.
Yeah, Duro on from Romeo Street
Mhm.
towards the mall,
To the mall, okay.
and then continuing on CH Meyer to Devon.
Oh, that's
Okay.
fantastic.
Yeah,
I was just going to say big kudos. That's fantastic. Thank you for putting that effort into that. And once you
Yes.
do the application, if you need an extra set of eyes to just take a go through, please send it to me and I'm happy to read.
Sounds good. Yeah, they're mainly done, and just need council's recommendation for the application, and then yeah, we'll send them. I can send them through. Yeah, I would love. They're very long, and their my background is more technical than grammar and writing, and like trying to really you're trying to check boxes for. They have kind of a criteria, and you're trying to. This project is going to check all these boxes, but you know, is it actually, or are you kind of grasping at straws to make sure that every box is checked? But it's definitely a good program, and yeah.
well, some of them will happen if you put 3 in, right? You would think.
Well, there's 400 million for the whole country. So I did a quick math just based on our population. I like if it was all divided evenly, we would get 400,000, but there's no, it's not saying per population based, it's application based. And some municipalities could have 20 people just writing applications for, you know, on a bunch of different projects. So
Yeah.
Sarah,
Well, thanks for doing it.
Yep. If you have a deadline, like send it to me and give me a deadline and I'm happy to give you feedback. So
okay.
the deadline is the 31st. So
Okay.
council's on the 28th, and then I got 3 days to finish it after that. But it's regardless if they say yes or no, I have to have it prepared because it takes longer than that to do the application. So.
Okay. Any other business? Okay, I note that our next meeting is April 27th. I hope to see you all there. And finally, adjournment. Do I have a motion for adjournment? Lee, second. Oh, Jody, thank you. All in favor? Motion is carried. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for your time.